this chapter, we'll be discussing physical and cognitive development in emerging adulthood. Let's talk about what emerging adulthood really even is. So when do people become adults? Well, we've talked about how adolescence really is this bridge time between middle childhood and young adulthood. The end of adolescence is often called emerging adulthood because it differs so markedly from early adolescence. Research shows that in many industrialized nations, most young adults only feel that they are truly adults after reaching their late 20s and early 30s. For these young people, the transition to adult roles has become so delayed and prolonged that it has spawned a new transitional period extending from the late teens to the mid to late 20s, and this is called emerging adulthood. Arnett, a researcher, refers to individuals as being in a phase of emerging adulthood. Robbins and Wilner coined the term quarter-life crisis to describe how life in one's 20s is really far from easy as individuals struggle to find their way. There's a lot they need to figure out and a lot that they need to adjust to. They take on student loans, face challenges with workplace politics, networking, time management, and other daily hassles. So this really can be a time of crisis where they need to self-explore and search for meaning. In cultures without clearly defined rites of passage, defining oneself as an adult rests on one's perception of whether personally relevant key criteria have been met. Locked out form or being unable to enter adult roles can contribute to these crises. Locked in form or feeling trapped in adult roles can also contribute to the quarter-life crisis. So what we see is that role transitions really mark adulthood. There is no definitive criteria for marking when one becomes an adult, especially in the West. So emerging adulthood is this period when individuals are not adolescents, but not yet fully adults. And it's this distinctive period, again, from the late teens to the mid to late 20s. So emerging adulthood is actually limited to cultures that postpone entry into adult roles until their 20s. In developing nations, only a privileged few experience this phase of emerging adulthood. In industrialized countries, young people who benefit from these transitional years typically come from families who are well off, who are able to provide financial support, for example, to send their children to college. So what we see is that wealth and longevity actually free young people from immediately needing to enter into the workforce. So emerging adulthood is really limited or non-existent for those people who are of very low SES. In addition, emerging adulthood is limited to middle and high SES industrialized nations. So only the wealthy, privileged few in developing countries really show this emerging adulthood stage. So because of its strong association with SES and higher education, some researchers reject the notion of emerging adulthood as a distinct period of development. So the most widely used criteria for deciding whether a person has reached adulthood are role transitions. These involve assuming new responsibilities and duties that mark movement into the next developmental stage. So what do you think are some role transitions? Well, this might include marriage, going to college, becoming a college student, being able to vote, becoming employed, leaving home, becoming a parent. These are all examples of role transitions. So Western culture has very few formal or clearly defined rituals, which makes it difficult to use any one event as the marker for becoming an adult. So when do you think that people become adults? think about all of the role transitions that have marked your personal transition from adolescence to adulthood. This might be holding a more or less permanent job, taking full responsibility for yourself, accepting the consequences of your own actions, deciding on your own beliefs and values, establishing a relationship with your own parents as a successful adult, launching one's financial independence. That can be a pretty big role transition that many people consider to be a marker of adulthood. What we see is that this is facilitated by finding a job. So this might start later for college graduates because many individuals actually return to live with their parents after graduation. So for many, the key indicator of becoming adult is launching your own career and establishing your financial independence. Research in Western cultures shows that living on your own accelerates the achievement of adulthood, whereas living with your parents slows it down. So some industrialized societies might consider going to college as a rite of passage, but for most people it seems that it's not until after they graduate that they feel that they're an adult. So some societies use rituals called rites of passage to mark this transition into adulthood more clearly. And rites of passage may involve highly elaborate steps that take days or even weeks, or they might just be compressed into a few minutes. So tribal rituals mark the transition to adulthood. They tend to be very public. They might involve pain or mutilation. Certain ethnic groups maintain formal rites of passage like bar or bat mitzvahs, quinceañeras, even confirmation could be considered a rite of passage. So these rites of passage are those important rituals that mark initiation into adulthood.